And after that beautiful message from Kryon, I invite you to open your eyes if you've had your eyes closed. And we're going to move to another part of the program where I am so excited to be meeting tonight's guest. She shares a connection with my sister because my sister was a paramedic for many years, and tonight's guest has developed amazing psychic abilities as a paramedic. Her name is Sarah K. Grace, and I want to make sure Sarah is on the Zoom feed with us. Zoom, are you there? I'm still coming back from my channel. Sarah, are you there?
Hello, I am here.
Oh, wonderful to see you, Sarah. And apologies for calling you Zoom.
Okay. You're forgiven.
You know, these shows are whatever happens, happens. You know, psychic paramedic turned holistic first responder, Sarah K. Grace used her psychic abilities while working as a paramedic in the busy California 911 system for 15 years. I ought to just stop right there. That is amazing. And she's got an amazing story, helping countless people through extreme crisis and death. She became an energetic support during people's worst moments.
So Sarah is now a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, and renowned intuitive healer. Specializing in psychic surgery and holistic treatment programs, she can help you pull your life out of the ditch, no matter how severe your current situation. Wow. Sarah, you are in the right place at the right time. Welcome to Healing Wednesday, and tell me all about your journey as a paramedic and then opening your psychic abilities.
Well, thank you guys again for having me. It's really beautiful to be here. And yeah, quite the journey indeed for me. And I just want to honor and acknowledge the power and clarity of both of you in the channel, because I can feel so much energy moving through my system as a result of our connection here. So I'm going to continue to ground myself, and thank you for that. I grew up in South Dakota in the middle of nowhere, pre-internet, on Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And there was no connection to the outside world. One day I just woke up at the age of 7 and I was able to start to see auric fields, is how it started for me. And over the course of a few weeks, the energetics and stimulus became more and more intense for me. So it went from just seeing colors and tracers to feeling sensations, people's intentions. Then I could feel disease or see disease in people's bodies, and it went on to be able to see spirit. And I didn't have any guidance. Unfortunately, it was a very volatile home life situation, and we came from a really conservative background. So when I did make mention, finally, after many weeks of kind of dealing with this on my own as a little kid, unfortunately, I was shamed and condemned and they told me not to talk about it because, it was evil. And so that really was a big foundational time for me, because I developed a fear and I thought, wow, there's something wrong with me, right? And I didn't understand. And that really marked it was a push-pull, love-hate relationship with my abilities from that moment until I really became healed and started utilizing them for good. But eventually, I went through a lot of shadow integration, trauma recovery as a result of all of that. And I didn't want anything to do with my abilities at all. But once I eventually became a paramedic, when I had moved to California, the energy just started working through me on these calls. And it was nothing I was trying to do because I was still really closeted and I didn't want it to be there, especially in such like an alpha type A machismo type environment with like the firefighters and the SWAT guys and stuff. I didn't want to be the weird person who sees dead people, on the calls or whatever. And so I was still very closeted, still very insecure, had a lot of toxic shame around the way that I was and the way that I was, because I didn't didn't understand. But over time, what happened is the energy started coming through me on these calls, and the precognition, and I would know what was going to happen before it did. And I would always know when death was near. And I became the paramedic who was really always there in the moments of death and like the very extreme crises type of calls. And the energy, the awareness, the intuition, the psychic knowing, the clairvoyance, what happened is on the calls, it would really slow down and become very matrix-like. And I would be guided by my guides and be able to show up and assist the patients in whatever capacity they needed. Oftentimes that was transitioning into death. So ultimately, the beginning stage for me of acceptance of being like this, it took me many, many, many years to come to acceptance. And even after being a paramedic for a long time and seeing that it was good, I was still reluctant out of fear of judgment. But now I'm like wide open. Just be like, this is how I am. It's helped a lot of people. It is what it is, right? And now I understand I'm not this lone weirdo, right? Like I used to think I was. I understand that there's so many of us out there, and it's better that we come together in conversations like this and communities like this to share.
I love that.
I know you have a question too, because you've talked to me before this, but I have one. Did you have one major takeaway that you could say from all those traumatic medical deaths that you were part of at that time?
Absolutely. My number one takeaway is to live life fully now. Because number one, none of us knows exactly when our time will come. It's inevitable for all of us that it will. And none of us are guaranteed. I can't tell you how many calls, almost every single day, we would go on trauma calls early in the morning. You know, people got up and they got dressed, had their cereal, they were pulling out a Starbucks drive-thru and they got T-boned and that was it, or whatever, on the car wreck on the freeway or whatever. They had no idea. And I think as humans, we get so hyper-focused and stressed and we try to figure everything out and control. But a lot of times we don't allow ourselves to live, to enjoy, right, life, and to take chances and to really feel all of the sensations of love and travel and joy and all of it. So live now.
I love that. And I mentioned before my sister being on the road as a paramedic, and in that environment, they see trauma on a daily basis. And it is that thing of we never know what can happen. And there are significant moments that occur. So my question is, what has been a significant 911 call that impacted you in a deep way?
There's so many, but one that really stands out is I was going on a hospice call with this beautiful woman, and she stands out because she was in extremis, end stage, whatever cancer or whatever she had, and she was very frail, almost translucent. So I knew that her time was near. And I'd seen so many people that had been going through illness or being needed to be treated or transported for various conditions. And they were so angry and bitter, and there was just this heaviness with them and resistance. And this woman was in total peace and acceptance. And she just glowed. And she had this wisdom to her that just permeated out. And I'll never forget as long as I live, because I was like, when you have an opportunity to be with someone who's very clearly close to death, I see that as an invitation or an opportunity, especially when she was holding such a soft, gentle acceptance and a non-resistance. So I wanted to know, like, what's the secret here? Like, what, how are you like this when most people are not accepting? And she just remembered herself as a fragment of God. She knows her true essence self as spirit. And she's like, I'm going home. There's nothing to fear in that. And it just really resonated, because in the 911 system it's such a dense, heavy, dark area of the human condition. And so to have that beacon of really refined light and soul essence it really stayed with me. Very rare.
Wow.
So over the years, I love that you said you became more comfortable with what was naturally gifted to you and helping people. And we do take on the fear of judgment from everyone else around us. But eventually, I guess you came out of the closet with these gifts. And what was the impact of those around you that you worked with?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I'll do both. So
Yeah.
my coming to terms with process over time. So I was in 911 for 15 years, very high call volume. Probably the first 8 years, heavily closeted, didn't say anything about it, but people could feel on scene that things were happening. And my coworkers started to question, what are you doing? There was instances where we had one young man who was under CPR for various conditions, and it was a very volatile scene. I walked in and an energy came over the top of me, and it was audible, that brought the energy down to a manageable state so that we could go ahead and deal with what needed to be dealt with. So that was one instance of the many times that the energetics worked on my behalf, where I was able to work with the energetics. And the people, they heard it. And so it was like not a deniable thing. They were like, what is this? So over time, I had enough of the experiences and enough where I was like, this is helping people. How could this be bad? This is really genuinely helping people. And so I started to care less what other people thought, because my tangible and lived experience was counter to what I used to fear. And then they're like, what are you doing? I'll be like, well, this is what it is for me. I see, the person's soul leaving the crown chakra, and I see their dead loved ones come in to meet them, or I see the celestial angels on the trauma calls, and this is how it is, and this is what I'm seeing. And they're like, oh, and some of them were like, me too, maybe in their own way. They could feel it, or they kind of sensed something, but they couldn't put words to it. There was more of a curiosity. And I was really surprised by that, especially because, again, this is a very hyper-masculine alpha field, right? So does that answer your question regarding workers?
Yeah.
And now I have to tell you, fast forward all these years, since I put the book out and I've been super out about it, I've had people from all over the place, like first responders, physicians, so many nurses. There are so many nurses that utilize these abilities in their own way. And so now I know for sure, like I'm not a weirdo.
So I want to tell the audience the book you mentioned, it's Journey into Grace. And tell us just a little bit about that book.
Journey into Grace. It is essentially my story coming to terms with all of the trauma and darkness and toxic shame that I had regarding my own abilities, my journey to empowerment, while we're also talking about actual 911 calls that I ran. And so it's a really neat layout between my story and actual 911 calls that I utilized my abilities on all of the different scenes.
Wow.
I'm so glad, because it's helping so many, as you said, first responders, nurses, and that curiosity, it gives permission to open up to others. So how would you describe how you can help people tune into their intuition?
Well, what I do now, which thank you for mentioning that, I did 15 years of 911, and then my intuition had me leaning more into the intuitive and energy healing realm. Now, you got to understand, coming from somebody who was heavily closeted for 25 years and then in a super masculine field, energy healing, I was like, really? But my intuition just had me keep leaning in. And so I went through my own healing process, my own channel integration process, and I learned about all of these different modalities. So what I do now is I work with people all over the world doing one-on-one sessions. And we do a lot of psychic surgery as my specialty, but trauma integration, right? And really working with medical intuition, psychic surgery, trauma integration, and helping them to understand their own power, understand how the energetics work within the infrastructure of the human, being, and how, just help them to kind of triage their life and come into their own power.
So right now, if you had some hardcore paramedics, first responders sitting in front of you, what would be, because I know they carry trauma, and for some it's even hard to talk about it. You know, it's very much kept inside. So if they were in front of you right now, what are the things that you would want them to know about the trauma and how they can maybe transmute it?
Well, first of all, that it's okay to not be okay. And one thing about first responders is they're not going to listen unless you are one of them. And so this has really played well for me because those of us that are first responders, it's a calling. We are a unique breed. We run towards what everybody else is running away from. And so there's an innate understanding. And so my second book, my first book is Journey into Grace, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic. You can find it on Amazon, and that's going to become, eventually, it's in the works to become a television series. Yay. And then my second book is Holistic PTSD Recovery for First Responders. So I actually laid out a whole program for those guys, just being like, okay, I know you're alpha. I know you don't want to look at this, but here's some things, right? And just start to kind of lay it out for them.
Well, I'm so excited about that. I mean, I really am excited because I know it is already making a difference, and in years to come, it will keep making a difference.
She's made a one word that people don't maybe not understand that I've heard all my life, but would you like to take us into psychic surgery?
Yes, thank you. That's actually really great. To me, it's kind of a specialized branch, if you will, of energy healing. And I understand all branches of energy healing, the different modalities to play beneficial roles. So psychic surgery, to me, it wasn't something that I asked or was looking to get into. It was more just kind of an obvious overlay with my skill set because of my abilities with anatomy, physiology, and as a first responder. So psychic surgery, in layman's terms, like super basic, it's like pressure washing and roto-rooting people for a living, right? What I'm actually doing is working on the etheric template and then navigating the energetic field all the way down to the cells and the infrastructure to recoalesce it back into health. But that doesn't make sense to most people. What they can hear is pressure washed and roto-rooted. So that's psychic surgery.
So in essence, you don't have to have a particular thing like, oh, I need surgery on my kidney or anything. You're doing almost like a general health wellness for the body. Is that right?
Changing the chemistry, I would imagine.
And it's all interconnected. And so if somebody has something, say, with the kidney per se, what we'll do is look at the overall auric field. And a lot of people are holding excess, dense, old, whether it's unintegrated trauma of their own, whether it's projection and fear from others, whatever it is in the field. So we'll clear that out. And then surgically, I have a big team, but I have 3 surgeons that actually work through me. So in those moments, my hands, when I'm doing the energy work, actually look like they turn into lasers, or whether we need scalpels or suction, working on the etheric template, working on the auric field. Of course, not doing physical surgery, but it is a specialized version that does have to do with surgical intervention in the auric field, if you will.
I love that, and I'd love to hear about a patient that you worked on, the story of what their issue was and then what happened after.
Yeah.
Oh, I could go on for days on this.
Yes.
Give us a couple.
Good.
People love this.
Okay, so one of the number one things that I see, and then I can get into real specific cases. One of the number one things that I see are going to be whether they're undiagnosed sensitives or empaths, right? And a lot of times people come to me apathetic, lethargic, depressed, suicidal, sluggish, overweight, and their endocrine systems and nervous systems are shot out. But they have this sense of disconnect. And so when we work, the first thing we'll do, you guys, I've found the most healing thing possible is just being validated and witnessed first. So there's so many people that are in such overwhelm now that to have me kind of come all the way down into the depths of the abyss and hang out with my little lantern without judging, but just witnessing is step one, because that unlocks like a relief and an openness. And then from there, we'll go and actually clear the auric field, and it's like moving 1,000 pounds of energetic sludge off, so that all of a sudden it's like they're coming back to life, right? And I see this with sensitives all the time, because they may not understand that our nervous systems are 2 to 3 times as sensitive as the standard person. Our GI system and endocrine systems get heavily impacted as a result of so much stimulus coming in. So we'll look at it from the physical. We'll do the physical clearing, and then if there's any particular intervention surgically that need to be done, we'll do that. And then we look at the physical, because the physical stuff is real too, and being able to support the body and the endocrine system, support GI health, maybe doing some cleanses, increasing hydration, getting sunshine. There's a lot of different ways, but I see that all the time. So it's important, if you guys, whoever's watching out there, and you're like, oh, I feel so overwhelmed and bogged down, and like nothing I do works, or I try really hard for a while and I keep sliding back down into this. Well, it could be energetic more than, right? Even physical. So that's one thing. And another example, just yesterday, I had a beautiful gentleman, and he had a ruptured appendix burst. And unfortunately, he wasn't aware that it had burst, and that can become, that can be fatal. That kills a lot of people. And if it doesn't kill them, it can really mess up the organs. And because he had such a healthy lifestyle, and he was into meditation and kind of our field for so long, he kind of walked his talk. He not only didn't die, but he didn't have like widespread necrosis. He did need a surgery. He did need heavy duty antibiotics. And then he was having some weird symptoms with tremors and things. And so after going into his field, I could see down in the abdominal cavity where the surgery had happened, and they had done a good job clearing out the necrotic tissue. But the way that it presented down in his tummy area, when you look at a normal organ system, the organ is obviously alive, and so the energy perfuses through. And in the physical body and in the emotional and mental bodies, the energies want to be able to perfuse through. Well, when we have calcified fear, things we haven't dealt with, if we've gone through traumas, which who hasn't, if we've dealt with addiction, if we've had surgeries, oftentimes what happens in the organ systems is the energy can't perfuse through that particular area. So yesterday for him, what I ended up doing was, it looked like almost like putting a graft. If you would think of somebody who had had a burn, and you could see how the skin kind of deforms, that's how it was looking on the energetics inside his tummy. And so just doing the procedural work of kind of almost putting this energetic graft in place, which to me in psychic surgery, what that looks like is bringing almost like the template of light. It's just a structure, and bringing that into and introducing it into that specific physiologic area, and then holding the intention so that the vibrations can begin to come alive to this new the new vibration, if that makes sense. And so, not to get too technical on you guys, I could geek out on this stuff for days, because it's what I love to do. But essentially, understanding energetics, he was able to feel the energy reconnecting within his stomach. And so we had a really good breakthrough. And there was a lot of emotion that released with him, which is typical, because anytime people, again, if there's unresolved trauma, if there's heaviness, if there's insecurity, if there's addiction, which most of us are addicted to something, even if it's sugar or technology or busyness, right? And so that's a distraction or a bypassing. And when we're willing to kind of go underneath and open up to that soft underbelly and tend to that and bring love and consciousness to that, a lot of healing can happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome to my world.
I love that.
Before we go to anything else, I want one more. Do you have something that sticks out, perhaps, that has happened in your work where you have watched a night and day, almost spontaneous remission? I know you've had one.
Oh, let me think, because there's really so many. Another really recent one was a woman almost frozen in anxiety and insomnia, and hyper focused on perfectionism, hyper focused on busyness and distraction, unresolved trauma due to her upbringing. And she was aware she had been in our spiritual world for a long time, and she had done a lot of different modalities and things. But even that, sometimes we put even more pressure on ourselves because we're like, oh, I'm supposed to be spiritual. I should get it. And that can actually add more pressure. And it's like, oh, honey, you're already just so like, a little ball of stress. Let's just calm you down. And so when we did the surgery, again, first, it's the witnessing. Above everything, you guys, it's the witnessing. Just like I see you and I see where you've been, and I understand and I can empathize and see what it feels like to be you. And just witnessing opens up this energetic snag. And then from there, if we have somebody who's really, really wired, we have to do a lot of softening. And so that looks like grounding the energy, just calming and kind of bringing in like golden light templates and activating the back sides of the chakras and really rooting down through the base, and just huge wailing catharses coming out. And I love it when we get into that place because, again, it's still very much like being a paramedic. I'm still very much paramedic, except now, again, it's like holistic first responder because we're working with the energetics and the soul. But huge breakthrough wails. And with her, we kept in touch and we did a couple more sessions, which oftentimes I like to do one and kind of let the person fly. And if they need to come back, cool. But for her, she needed a little bit more hand holding. And once we did a little bit more, she felt secure enough within herself, which is always my goal, to remind you of your own power. All of us have this within ourselves, and with a little bit of guidance and a little bit of understanding, people can come back and access that within themselves. And so she did a radical shift and transformation, a life overhaul within just a few months. Nervous system relaxed, insomnia went away, really grounded down. And she had gotten into things like EMDR for further therapy and stuff like that to help work the rest of the childhood stuff out. But we really got her pulled out of that energetic ditch, triage, stabilized, and so that she felt like, okay, like I can do this now for real.
What I sensed in all of that was that you just took all that pressure and it just went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is huge.
Yeah, that's everything really. Because
it is.
That's when I say roto-rooting. It's like they're pressure washing or roto-rooting. That's a way that like the mind can really understand. That's not this like hyper spiritual or super technical term, but it is that. It's being witnessed and then manipulating or shifting the energetics so that it integrates whatever no longer serves, integrates. The person then feels as though they've lost 1,000 pounds. They get completely reset. They feel like, oh my God, it's like I feel like myself again for the first time in forever, right? And just that, because then that's me getting you to baseline. And then we're going to give you a step-by-step program for you to like, okay, now this is how you move forward so that you can feel really powerful with it.
Just awesome. And if you are interested in everything Sarah has to offer, she's got an amazing free offer for our Healing Wednesday members. You can look at that in the chat. And if you're watching the replay, scroll below the video. You'll see the offer there, of course, and her website, sarahkgrace.com. Amazing books are already out there. Her latest one, I love the title, Who is Going to Save You Now? I mean, that's quite a title from a paramedic. The answer, of course, is you. You're going to save yourself. We're almost at the end of our time, but I do want to ask if there's any final words you want to share.
I'm just so grateful for both of you and for everyone who's participating, because clearly we're being called to come together now for a reason. And I love, having these conversations and uplifting one another. So if anybody wants to reach out, I do work with people directly. So that, again, you can find sessions at sarahkgrace.com, and that's Sarah with an H. kgrace.com. And I also have my own online community, which is super sweet. It's called the Grace Place. And what we're leaning towards and what I'm going to be building in conjunction with Who is Going to Save You Now is a real life school for the gifted to really help people lean into very practical tools and ways that they can become empowered with their gifts and overcome their traumas. So that's it. That's in the Grace Place.
Oh,
Fabulous. The
wonderful.
Grace Place. Well,
Grace Place.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you.
So we are now going to take a short break, and then we'll see you back here for Miracle Moments.
Yes,
And
we will.